Awesome. Yep, that's me. Okay, thanks. Hey everyone. So my name is Luis. I'm from the Philippines, and you know, it's my first time in North Carolina. Although I've been in the States many times over the last 3-4 years. I've been in crypto for a while now, and I think the thing that I love about this industry and this community so much is that it really kind of brings people together. And you know, I'll be the first to admit that some of the people that it brings together tend to be crazy. But maybe that's part of the charm, right? Because there are believers in this industry that saw that this was going to change the world way before it was even kind of reasonable to think that. And I'm here in front of you today kind of as, you know, one of the examples of those people that, you know, there was no real reason for me to believe that Bitcoin or crypto was going to change the world back in 2014, but something about it just was fundamentally different from everything else that, you know, I'd ever seen before. And I've been a kind of technologist for the last 12 years of my career. So when I really dug deep, it seemed like crypto was just going to be this revolutionary thing that I needed to be a part of. So what I'm going to speak about over the next 15 minutes is kind of how things are going on the other side of the world. So for those of you who are kind of not super acquainted with Southeast Asia as a region, I like to think about it as not China, you know, that other part of Asia that people tend to kind of forget about. So the Southeast Asian region, we kind of refer to that as ASEAN, the ASEAN region. That's 10 countries. The pink one in the middle is the Philippines, and that's where I'm from. The statistics are, you know, pretty much what you'd expect for this kind of area. There's about 650 million people there. About 3 dozen different languages are spoken, so it's not exactly the most contiguous block of folks that you can find. Fairly large GDP, that's 6th largest in the world if you treated the ASEAN region as a country. And most interesting are the last 2 statistics down there. 3% crypto penetration, that's estimated, that's not really... we've tried to put it together from a variety of sources, and 3% is kind of the optimistic version of this range. And obviously there's like some plus minus on that. But possibly even more interesting is that with a growing crypto penetration, we remain at about 30% banking penetration, meaning that the average ASEAN person you can't really expect them to have a bank account even until now. And a lot of the things that, you know, fintech startups like us think about is like what will actually happen to, you know, the 70%. You know, will banks ever catch up, or will this generation just leapfrog that? So that answer to that question is not really complete. It's not obvious yet. It's not clear. But there's certainly enough people working in this space, kind of focusing on this region of the world to try to, you know, really make a dent in it and see what happens. So I've got a couple of slides over the next few minutes that talks about some of the countries in the ASEAN region and just a few notable things about them. Malaysia is kind of one that I've become very familiar with over the last couple of months because I've been on the fundraising trail, I've been on the conference trail, and I've spent a couple of weeks here in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. And what was surprising to me that there was a handful of startups that are internationally recognized out of KL that I didn't actually, like Etherscan, for example, is pretty much the de facto place that you would go to look for, you know, information about the Ethereum blockchain, and I had not realized that was actually from Kuala Lumpur. The next statistic you'll see under there is that they have about $50 million in estimated monthly trading volume, which is not a lot. That's quite small in the grand scheme of things. But what's interesting is that, you know, it's a growing population. It's people that are very passionate. They are somehow able to do a monthly meetup that has 200 plus attendees every month. And for some reason, you know, people just keep on coming. They even have weekly meetups that has like several dozen attendees each time. It's very consistent. And I think that's kind of one of the things that I found most surprising about all of these various Asian countries that I've had time to kind of get acquainted with, is that they're very, very consistent with the way that they meet up and keep in touch with each other and make sure that everyone in the community knows everybody else. Philippines, again, that's us, about 100 million people. We've got a couple of startups that are kind of at the forefront. The one that has probably been kind of most associated with the Philippines is Coins.ph, which is, I guess, for, you know, the easiest way I can compare them is they're like the Coinbase of the Philippines. So they kind of started right around the same time. They were a 2013 startup, and Coinbase was 2012. So kind of in that same range of first generation Bitcoin wallets. The Philippines is probably hitting about $80 to $100 million in monthly trading volume. So larger than Malaysia, but again, not that huge in the grand scheme of things, but definitely increasing year on year. What's most interesting about the Philippines is that we were the first in the region to actually have a license for a virtual currency startup, meaning that if you were a Bitcoin exchange, a crypto exchange for that matter, it would be very easy for you to acquire licensing. You just have to apply for it from our central bank. As far as I know, we're the only one in the region that has formal legislation for virtual currencies, although if you go north to Japan, they've got licenses you can get there. I believe South Korea is also working on one. So it's definitely like a very kind of progressive jurisdiction to be doing this sort of work in. And we've managed to kind of use that license to great effect in terms of growing the trust of our customers, because if you're licensed and regulated, then it implies that you're probably not some kind of fly-by-night operation, right? The third country that I'll speak about is Indonesia. So they're the largest in the region. So it's 260 million people. They account for a third of all of the people in the ASEAN region. The two startups that are most relevant right now, Indodax is kind of like the biggest order book in the region, and PandiX is like a crypto exchange platform that's quite young. Indonesia is doing $400 million or more month on month, which is, again, the largest in the region. And their order book, Indodax, has been around since 2013, if I'm not mistaken, so it's one of the oldest in the world. It's funny because I met these guys at a Bitcoin event back in 2014, and back then we were talking about how they were very young and they were doing like something 20 to 50 Bitcoin a day in trading volume. And I can't even remember what 20 to 50 Bitcoin cost back then, but it was just like whenever I see them, I'm constantly surprised at how big they've become. And I think that their work is testament to how crypto has really taken hold in that part of the world. Indonesia is basically a neighbor of the Philippines, and we're often mistaken for each other. When I travel to Jakarta all the time, and people speak to me in Bahasa because we look very similar. So I guess the reason why I'm speaking about these countries and kind of featuring what they've been doing is that I want to point out that the ASEAN region is actually a very large growth market for efforts in cryptocurrency. One of the reasons is that regulation is not as stifling as it is in other parts of the world. So I'm not saying that it's stifling in the US, but there's a reason why I've never tried to do business here. It just seems like there's a lot of stuff going on, and it feels like it would be too challenging for someone with limited resources to try to kind of wrangle a perfectly regulated organization out here. In the Philippines, at least you know exactly what you need to do. It's not exactly straightforward to get a license. It might take some time and resources, but at least it's well defined and you know what you need to comply with. The second reason why it's a great market is because half of the region is in what we call a demographic sweet spot, meaning that the working population, that segment of the population that is able to work and produce economic output, far exceeds that part of the population that is either too young or too old. And if your economy is within this demographic sweet spot, it is usually that point in time when you're able to make the furthest strides in terms of kind of bringing your economy forward. One of the other major advantages is that it's got very natural relationships with North Asia. So that's China, South Korea, and Japan. And if you know anything about crypto, you'll know that most of the activity in the world is focused around those three countries. China because it's China, South Korea because they've got some of the craziest huge Bitcoin exchanges there, and Japan because they've got licensed Bitcoin exchanges there. There's so much stuff, economic activity going on between North Asia and Southeast Asia, and just in terms of ease of connectivity between the two regions, we all share the same time zones. So it's very easy for us to work together. We're a natural place for things like business process outsourcing or BPO. We're a natural place for tourism. And then there's migration going both ways. So like there are these very organic relationships that have already kind of just appeared over the last couple of decades. And crypto is just something that you would put on top of that. And possibly the most important reason why this is a real growth market is because there's no clear market leaders yet. So there's crypto penetration is in the 3% range. That's kind of not very far from what it is here in the States. By most optimistic estimates, there's about 25 million Bitcoin wallets in the US. So that's about 5% as well. So we're kind of in that range, but there's no Coinbase that is kind of dominating that field. So there's a lot of opportunity still. Crypto is becoming more and more popular with every passing day in the region, but it also means that there's so many scams, right? There's a lack of customer education. And a lot of people want to get into crypto because they heard that their friend got really rich from buying Bitcoin a few years ago. But they can't tell the difference between a real Bitcoin wallet and a completely scammy one. This particular news item is interesting. So 900 million pesos is the size of the scam. That's about $18 million, so it's pretty significant. And this couple was able to kind of put together this Ponzi scheme where people just pour money in, and they keep promising that because it's in Bitcoin, it'll keep growing week on week. And obviously, that is not really what happens. So there's just not enough people out there who are able to explain the crypto phenomenon to really kind of educate the market, and that's kind of how people like this can get away with it. Really quickly about what Bloom is doing, we're enabling ASEAN money changers to become a trusted and compliant bridge between cash and crypto. So there's two statistics that I wanted to share with you. The first one was the one that you heard earlier. There's only about 30% of the region has bank accounts, right? So that means that predominantly we still kind of focus very much on hard cash, the cash in your pocket, the cash in your safe back home. And the second thing is, the second statistic is that there's about 100,000 money changers. These are like foreign exchange agents all over the ASEAN region. So foreign exchange agents are the ones you will see in airports or hotels who will accept US dollars and exchange it for local currency. So what Bloom is trying to do is we're trying to make these guys that are all over the region, who are all licensed and regulated in their jurisdictions, we're trying to make them the bridge between the cash in your pocket and crypto on the blockchain. We're trying to make them that trusted bridge. So this is, again, the statistic. The reason why they're the perfect place for this kind of activity is because, firstly, they've been there forever. They're very trusted. The brands are all there. People are familiar with them. They know that if you go to a money changer or a foreign exchange agent, then you can exchange your money for something else, right? And most importantly, they're very compliant. So we're building a couple of apps. This first one is a teller application, which is what we will give to the money changers, and using this application, they'll be able to buy and sell Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin kind of over the counter, just as easily as they're buying or selling US dollars or Chinese yuan or anything else. All of the liquidity will be provided by Bloom, and we are creating all of this on top of the Stellar blockchain. We're also creating a wallet application. And this wallet application is meant to kind of solve that other problem that we were seeing earlier about the scams and stuff. And I believe that if you kind of properly educate people on what crypto is and why it acts the way it does, then they are going to be less likely to fall for things like these pyramid schemes and these Ponzi schemes. And the wallet that we're envisioning will do the teaching to the customer, kind of guide them through this whole process of securing their funds. The project is called BX8, and I kind of wanted to show this graphic and then tell you that I had the coins to give away back on the table outside, but I kind of gave the last one away about an hour ago. But you can at least see it here. And this is kind of the name of the token that's going to be powering the whole thing. If you want to find out more, I invite you to visit us at bx8.io. I'll be here for another few hours outside. The table's just over there. and then I'm flying off to Bangkok for another conference. So it's kind of a busy week for me. So thanks everyone for your time, and if there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Thanks.